Hi everyone, and welcome to our Octocon Presents for May. I nearly said June, but we're still in May. I'm here today with Sarah Rees Brennan, and we're going to talk about all things villainous and evil and chaotic for her new book, All Hail Chaos. Sarah is a Irish writer of many, many things, including the Limburn Legacy trilogy. Sorry, I forgot the name wrong. You've written stuff for Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, or whatever the full name was. I can't remember, but it was very good. And lots of other stuff. But with her new trilogy, two books out so far, which is known, I believe, as Time of Iron. She's delving into what happens if somebody gets moved into another world where they already know or they think they know what's going to happen in the story and how that pans out for them. So in Long Live Evil, Ray, who's a terminal cancer patient, gets the chance to go through a door into her sister's favorite series. And it's Ray's favorite series too, apparently, except Ray hasn't read the first book properly. And she gets dropped right into the middle of the first book. And she's a villain. And she decides to embrace her villainy, and all sorts of things ensue because she doesn't quite know what's going on, although she thinks she does. And it ended up at the end of Long Live Evil, where the Emperor, who is Ray's favorite character, had crawled out of the abyss, followed by a horde of undead, taken over the city, sat on his big throne, wearing his fancy armor, waving his big sword, holding the head of the king in his hands. And I read it and went, what the hell? How are we going to get what is going to happen in the next book? Because it was left in such a position with Ray, the main character, sitting there going, oops. And All Hail Chaos picks up immediately on that. So there will be some spoilers for Long Live Evil because it's going to be really hard to talk about All Hail Chaos without a few spoilers. Hopefully, you've all read it by now. But if not, there will be a few. We'll try and avoid big spoilers for All Hail Chaos. And it's over to Sarah, who's going to read for a bit.
Hello, Octocon. Thank you for having me. I've immediately lost my place, but I know what I want to read. This is from All Hail Chaos. But if you haven't read All Hail Chaos, don't worry, it's not too spoilery. It is a little spoiler for Long Live Evil, but Catherine has already given you a very wonderful summary. Thank you for the marvelous introduction, Catherine. And it does connect also with several things I was trying to do in Long Live Evil. Because one thing that inspired me to write Long Live Evil is I had cancer myself, as does the protagonist of Long Live Evil. I won't call her the heroine because, she wakes up into the story as a villain. But when you're sick, people think differently about you. The same way when you have anything that Leonard Cohen calls the great disappointment of your life. Uh, when you get sick or you have terrible something terrible happens with your love life, or something terrible happens with your family, or you have, say, a period of mental health problems, that's when you find out that a lot of people in your life sort of drop out. They're like, I can't stick it for the long haul. um and they want to blame that on you because they want to be the people who will hang, but they also don't want to deal with how sad you are or how angry you are, to have cancer, to have had something else terrible happen to you. And then you blame yourself because these people that you loved and trusted told you it was you. So it made me think a lot about why people empathize with villains in stories, why the villain song in every Disney musical is a banger, why Wicked resonated with so many people, why we love an anti hero. And several years ago, somebody wrote to me and was like, "How dare you?" Uh, I think it was a gift set of Kylo Ren, and the answer was that my friend had made it. So I was like, "Oh, good job, honey!" Like, um, but I was like, "Listen, I don't even like Kylo Ren that much. He's fine." I mean, I don't approve of blowing up planets, but I think I'm fine. But now I would defend to the death people's right to like Kylo Ren. Don't talk to me that way. It's fiction. And when we empathize with people who do horrific crimes in fiction, there are so many fictional murderers who I like. It isn't saying that I wish to murder people in real life, it's saying that I want catharsis. And in many cases, a lot of villains, their motivation is that they lost someone that they loved, and now they're taking it out in the world, or they're doing something very ill advised to resurrect the person that they loved. And that's reminds me of the saying, "I could not love thee, dear, so much. Did I not love honor more?" But with a villain, they don't say that. They're like, "No, don't worry about honor, baby. I'll blow up the moon." And that in this world where a lot of people disappoint us and make us really sad, um, we long for love. That is, this is a quote from Long Live Evil, that feels more real than real love. And so I was like, I understand why people are drawn to terrible characters, to evil emperors and evil queens and wicked people, traitors, and people of all kinds. I also wrote a musical because the Wicked and the Frozen, on how it Let It Go transforms the movie from a tragedy about an evil Snow Queen into a story of sisters redeeming each other. Anyway, I put a musical in Long Live Evil. It's been a very controversial move. I did not realize that so many people were against it. They're like, "Oh, look, I was with you up till then." And I'm like, "All right." So, as is my way, I'm kind of contrary. I doubled down and I wrote a musical, or maybe two, into All Hail Chaos. And this one is about that experience of loving someone who is monstrous, and why you might love them, and how, however, if that became real, say by walking into a book, that would be very complicated. All right, sorry, I'll read now. That was a big intro. Run to the abyss to watch my man rise, rise. He can only get it if he's got red eyes. My pretty baby can be pretty odd. Did you hear? He's the son of a god. Hate to see his downfall. Loved watching as he fell. Someone that's smoking must belong in hell. There's a curse upon him. Wish I was on him too. If he'd just glance my way, I'd die, and so will you. That's it.
Short and sweet, but I do love the musicals, I have to say. I like that Time of Iron, the series in our world, has a musical and is now getting a sequel to that musical. It's like, yeah, more musicals about villains, please. So you mentioned Ray, you mentioned trust issues, all the rest of it. Um, do you think so? She's brought a lot of kind of simmering anger as well as this trust issues through from our world into, from her hospital bed into the world of Time of Iron. How much do those drive her actions and her choices and her mistakes?
I think almost entirely. The problem with Ray is that she is both arsonist and firefighter, if you will. She is a team player by nature, which I don't know that I really am, but of course, Ray is not me. She is someone who immediately she walks into the book, she realizes that she is one of the villains of the story designated, and she is like, I must gather together the minor villains of the story in a rogues gallery to sort of drive the narrative like they stole it, to try to avert the doom that she fears is coming for her in her own life with her terminal cancer diagnosis. But also she's aware that these people that she's coming to meet, even though she doesn't think of them, she doesn't know if they're entirely people or characters, but she is worried for their lives. And so she's like, can we all escape our narrative doom? And meanwhile, the reader is watching, going, oh God, the narrative doom is behind you, behind you. Um, but she also has enormous trust issues. She was left by almost everyone in her life in the real world, because that's what happens a lot of the time. Um, I mentor people with cancer now, and they, when you're diagnosed, they take you aside and they're like, listen, you have to accept the really real possibility that your partner will leave you. But it's not just partners. One girl in her teens who I mentored, Everybody else went to the school dance that she was meant to go to with them, and they put up a million videos being like, the whole gang's here, except she wasn't there. They had just counted her out, and they never spoke to her again. And another mentee of mine, waited hours. I was waiting with her for her husband to pick her up, and he never did. Another one, she and her husband split, and a couple of years later, the husband's new girlfriend was like, "Do you mind if I ask why you stopped loving him? Because you stopped like sleeping with him and you stopped helping him with chores." And she's like, "What? When I had cancer?" And the girlfriend was like, "Oh, he didn't mention that part." And I had a very close writing friend who read out an account of me crying in a bed as if she was like, "Well, Sarah's Brennan. She has tantrums. She's kind of a bad person." And to a group of people. And she didn't mention the bit where I had cancer at the time and could barely walk. And that is part of it, that you make people feel really uncomfortable when something really bad happens to you, but they don't want to feel like bad people. So they're like, what if you were the bad person instead? Don't bring up the bit of it that makes it all make sense. And so Ray has internalized that because she's young, she's 20, and she's had this terrible disease for a long time. And so when she wakes up in the narrative as a villain, she's like, yeah, that's about right. That's what people have been telling her for years. But she's also full of rage and new energy. In some ways, it's a power fantasy. It's like, what if you could go through the wardrobe door to Narnia? What if you could go into A Song of Ice and Fire? What would you do then? Could you save anybody? Could you avert the Red Wedding? Would you do a musical number? So she wants to get these people together, but she also is allowed, by thinking of themselves as characters, to not think of them as people who she can hurt and who can hurt her because she's been so hurt before. And that also means, your favorite character, you say, oh, I love them. But do you really love them for real? What does that mean if they can suddenly choose to love you back or not to love you back or to be very angry with you because of all that stuff you did? And her lack of ability to trust complicates all of that, and I hope it's understandable. But she's also very aware that a lot of these characters are going to perform terrible acts in future. So that's also something that validates her trust issues from within the world. She's like, well, I know that you murder like 800 people in one day, so I don't know that I'm going to roll the dice on telling you something you might not like to hear. And that's understandable.
Feels like for Long Live Evil, Ray's embracing the dark side for its own sake and some its own sake, from her own sake as well, just to experience that, to experience life
Yeah.
that she hasn't had the chance to experience because she's had cancer for 4 years. She's lost out on those critical kind of late teen years where you start to experience so much of life. So she throws that in as well as the villainy. And then in All Hail Chaos, the appeal of being a villain seems to be for what she can actually accomplish. She's trying to course correct in All Hail Chaos a lot. She's going, oh, yeah, I sort of screwed up there by thinking this was the thing, and that person wasn't who I thought it was. And now this other person's on a completely different path. But I can get the narrative back on track if I embrace being a villain even more. I mean, I don't know how that's going to work for her.
I mean, it works in a complicated way. I really like what you're saying about evil. I do think that something that draws us to villainy is that villains often seem to be having a good time. Like people have evil laughs, they have evil glee, they have moments where they sweep in and they look fabulous. They have the best
Best
musical
outfits.
number.
Best outfits.
Absolutely. They're like, here I am in my corset, chin high, think murder. And for someone whose life is pretty dark and who's narrowed down so much, because Ray assumed she was going to have this big, wonderful life, and then she got her terrible diagnosis. The appeal of having to have a really good time. She also really loves one character. Here I know I'm dicing very close to spoilers, because not only does the Emperor has fantastic power, but he also isn't, like many male leads, brooding. He kind of takes a swerve. He's like, I've slaughtered many people with my enormous sword, and I'm over it. And whether he's over it or not, both of them are very good at, in that way, being like, I've shoved the problem aside, I've fixed it. Great job, me. And with Ray does it with schemes. He does it with enormous swords, and magical powers of lightning and so forth. So different methodology, but kind of the same personality behind it, and that's what part of what she empathizes with, both the urge for revenge against the world, but also this great urge to embrace joy.
What I kind of admire about Ray is that she's not out to fix him. She knows he's horrendous, but this, it's such a, I'm going to say trope, but almost a real world trope that yes, we will fix the bad boy. We like our, I mean, little sad meow meows or whatever the term is. We like our anti-heroes. We want the morally grey ones. We want the bad boys. But there's always, well, not always, but very often the undercurrent of we will fix them. And in Ray's case, it's like,
I think she knows she has that inherent sympathy. So, like, I don't think she feels capable of fixing anyone. She knows that she has screwed up herself and that she would screw up people more. But I also think that we kind of we love them because they're bad. I don't think we like Heathcliff because he's a great person. Lord Byron, who coined the term "mad, bad, and dangerous to know," notoriously not that great to have as a boyfriend or a husband. Adopted a bear at one point. And obviously Byron was a real person, whereas Heathcliff and Kylo Ren are not. But it's kind of like when people say, are women going to try to fix bad boys in real life? And you're like, listen, bad boys in real life are very seldom vampires or on deranged revenge missions to capture the Gothic manor. They That's like saying to me, it's like saying, and I think I'm stealing this from somewhere, I think I'm paraphrasing it, but it's like, wow, Formula One racing videos are not great driver's ed manuals. And I was like, yeah, they're not meant to be. That's not what they're for. This is for catharsis, this is for fantasy, and this is for also talking about wanting what you want yourself, whether you want enough power to smash the moon before you have coffee or not. Fantasy is real life, but it's written in scarlet and gold. It's not written in black and white.
I mean, Ray pulls together her band of minions, her band of little lesser villains, perhaps, and other ones that she thinks should be villains, maybe are. The Golden Cobra is seen as a villain by a lot of people, including Marius, who is the shining, perfect knight, who is, why is he not the love interest? He's like this perfect, I can't even, uh, stereotype, archetype of you know, just the perfect night. And I love that we get his point of view, especially in sort of in Long Live Evil as well. It's such a nice counterpoint to be able to have somebody's point of view and go, okay, so I mean, normally he would be the main point of view. He's the heroic character. He's the one that you would be seeing everything through and going, oh yes, those villains over there. He's out to thwart them. Um, it's the balance is really good for me in that, and I've lost my train of thought because that's what Marius does. He derails your train of thought. No, I love how oblivious he is to really a lot of stuff, but also how important he is to the narrative in his own right. And you have Ema as well, who is the lady's maid, and her point of view is in Long Live Evil, and she's one of the minor villainesses. And again, not quite what people expect, I think. I'm
To
sorry, I've not really got a question here. I'm just
I'm views on the points of view of her bit, because of course Ray's point of view is the bit that's portal fantasy. She's like, I'm from our world. I'm bringing Western morals to this, and my thoughts also on like what I thought when it was a work of fiction, which doesn't quite work, but she keeps trying to project it on anyway. And Ray is often sure that she is right, and when she's sure she's wrong, she's sure she's right about being wrong. But Marius to me was I love T.H. White. I love Arthurian myths generally, but something that really inspired me was the Once and Future King. Indeed, the Once and Forever Emperor is, of course, a play on the Once and Future King. And it did make me think of all the myths we have, that there is a king who's going to return to us and fix everything. But what if you tell that myth darker? Because there's never been a good empire. So if you're waiting for the emperor's return, you're already waiting for evil. That is an ominous thing. But then isn't the idea of an authoritarian being coming to fix everything sort of ominous already?
Mm-hmm.
That said, Marius loves it. Marius lives in the black and white. So I wanted to be like, here we are in an Arthurian epic. Here we have his point of view. So we see what kind of world this is that Ray has crashed into. And to have him thinking of things in the traditional way. And then when he starts to change his mind, to challenge things. We're also very aware of the knife edge of tension with him because we are on the side of the villains, I hope, in Long Live Evil. So we're now kind of worried that we're seeing Marius become what we consider a villain. So he too is walking the knife edge because if he becomes too rigorous in his thinking, then he'll break before he bends. And he thinks it's a virtue to break before he bends. But he is on this collision course with, and I think, what if an Arthurian knight meets a New York theater kid? Was something that I thought about a lot. That clash of enormously different points of view and how caring about one person can really change you. But I also didn't want Marius is an aristocrat, and Ray has gone into the body of an aristocrat as well. And I didn't want to say only Ray is the person who can change this world or who challenges this world and brings depth to this world, because that's saying the world's fake. So I wanted to have Emer as a sort of the way Downton Abbey back in the day was like we're doing a lot of the servant stuff. Be like, why are we not asking about Lancelot's butler? Why are we not talking about Guinevere's maid? And so here we have Guinevere's maid, who is also predicted to be a fantasy Lizzie Borden, and she has huge class rage. And she's thinking of all these things, but she's also she has this great intimacy with with Ray's life, with the life of the woman who Ray has now walked into her body. And so, one, she knows Ray better than she knows herself, which is, I think, a position a lot of servants would be in. They know the things you don't admit to yourself. But also, she is very much her own person. And by having both Emer and Marius in Long of Evil, I wanted to say, when Ray doesn't think this world is real, I want the reader to think it's real because they're empathizing with these characters the same way I hope that they do with Ray.
I think for All Hell Chaos, Emma's in a different environment. She's no longer in the palace. She's no longer the lady's maid who has a job. She's living out in the cauldron in the city, which is the part of it which is liberty, where you can get up to whatever you like, really. And it's a whole different class illustration for me in that because you're showing you've got the underclass of the city, and that's something that seems to be very stratified into the world building. I know at one point in Long Live Evil, you talk about, I think it's the 5 different levels of people.
Yeah.
So that was cool to see.
Yeah.
How much thought went into that? That's a terrible question for a writer. Was that always something you wanted to really strongly illustrate, just the different levels of society?
Definitely. I think a lot about classism. It's something that's talked about less because it's something that people can do dream about transcending. It's something people are a bit embarrassed about. You know, those people who are like, oh, I'm upper middle class, and you're like, you're very rich. Come on now. And I live in the Liberties in Dublin, which is also horrifyingly expensive, but it used to be the area where really the laws didn't apply and you could pickpocket somebody if you were strong enough. And that's an interesting thing to me, the way people police themselves, because it doesn't immediately become a free for all after dark, all the rules are off and you'll be murdering each other, but it does become its own society, sort of like pirate society. Back in the day, they were like, well, we're breaking the law, so we might as well go make our own society, but it generally will have laws too. So pirates had an early form of gay marriage. So the liberty in the books, which is called the Cauldron, is a really interesting place because it's not only the place where the laws of the city don't apply, but where you can have queerness flourish, art flourish, but also you really might get very murdered. And it's no coincidence that the cauldron, the lowest part of the city, and the palace, the highest part of the city, the whole town is set on the edge of a fiery abyss. I'm not a subtle person. And so it's called the Palace on the Edge, but it's also the Liberty on the Edge. They're both very directly on the absolute bleeding edge of fire and smoke and the sounds of the undead. And so, because the lowest and the highest are so connected to this wound in the world, they were something I wanted to speak to. And it's no coincidence that major characters like Key was found on the side of the abyss, so was Emer, and Key has lived most of his life in the cauldron. He calls himself Key of the Cauldron. It's Other people call him other things, but he's really pretty clear that he's Key of the Cauldron. And the cobra, the golden cobra, was placed by the goddess. Oh my god, that's huge spoiler. I forget what I just said. But he was placed by the narrative in the cauldron, and that is an important thing. And now having Emer in the cauldron gets us to see the day-to-day life of the cauldron, gets us to meet the people who live in the cauldron, and both understand more where Key and the Cobra come up from, but also what these people are like and how they're not that different from the palace people, but that their points of view are dramatically different.
I'm just trying to think where to go next with this because that was very good. Actually, just touch on the queerness, like you mentioned, the liberties is a lot seems a lot more freer than Palace Society. Although there's openly queer characters in the Palace Society as well. Certainly when Ema goes down into the cauldron, she's discovering a different world to some extent. Um, do you want to talk a bit about queer relationships in the novels at all, or
I mean, they
there's
exist.
some good ones? There's some good ones. It's
It's an interesting thing to me because, of course, we think about progress as linear, but it's absolutely not linear. It's like two steps forward, one step back. The apocryphal story of Queen Victoria being like, "Well, we've got to outlaw the gay men," and people are like, "And the lesbians, Queen Victoria," and Queen Victoria's like, "The what? The whomst?" So, for instance, the point is made in the books that a lady and her maid are absolutely meant to sleep in the same room together. You're guarded by a man who stands outside, you're inside with your maid, and thus your virtue cannot be assailed unless. Uh,
Mhm.
Also, there's the already sad, and just like Oscar Wilde and wearing the green carnation, people who are in the already sad are often othered already, so people are not that surprised if they are some flavor of queer. I have a character called Fabianus, and because he is in the already set, and because he is very fashionable, and because he is in a caretaking role with his younger sisters and brother, everyone assumes he's gay, but he's in fact bisexual, and everyone's stunned when he's taking an interest in a lady. They don't pick up on
That
it at
was
all.
lovely. I enjoyed that very much. It was a great, great, nice little reveal there. And it was like, oh, yeah, no, this makes sense narratively as well. Just
Yeah.
people stop, assume making assumptions.
And then there's Tagar, which is another country. In Long the View, we meet the Princess Vasilisa, but in the second book, we have her brother, King Ivor, and her quasi suitor, Count Torhel, and his mama, and we get and various other characters. And I was like, oh, I've introduced an invading army. What a cool thing to do at the end of book one. But that meant in book two, they have to be people. And they also have to have their own culture, which is a very divided culture, their own religion, and their own attitude to queerness. One thing I was reading River Kings by Kat Jarman, because if you're a writer, you read a ton of nonfiction about everything you might find interesting. I'm currently reading The Secret History of Sharks. What that's meant to tell you, I don't know. But in River Kings, it was discussing the Viking attitude to homosexuality was like, it's fine, do whatever. Of course, all fine. Unless with a fellow warrior. That's very forbidden. You're like, I was like, oh, go on. But of course, we don't think about it that way. We have a lot of compartments and labels right now, which is much better than ignoring that any alternative sexuality or gender or way of being exists. But then I think about ancient Sumer and that the fact they thought there were seven genders. And so you're like, there's much to teach us from both the past and from fantastical reimaginings of the past and present.
So for All Hail Chaos, we talked about Marius, Ray, and Ema being the point of view characters in Long Live Evil. We've now got Pio, who is the Prime Minister and is incredibly straight and dry and just wants to get the economy working and doesn't want this emperor sitting around dripping blood off his sword everywhere. And I absolutely adored his point of view because it was just it's so deadpan and it's such a fantastic contrast to the massively epic other points of view that are going on. And then we've got Caracalla. Did I say that right again? Caracalla.
Character.
Still can't say it right.
Okay.
Who is Marius's little sister, and she's an absolute oblivious cinnamon roll. She's just adorable in many ways, but also a bit worrying. And there are different kinds of archetypes of fantasy characters that you're adding in. How did you choose which archetypes you wanted to bring in?
I mean, well, it was tricky. And I remember meeting up with a friend of mine, Jen Lynn Barnes, and I was telling her about the sequel. And she was like, what do you mean you're doing you're doing the middle-aged prime minister? Oh my God, Sarah, that is not an intuitive move. Readers are not going to be that eager to see him. And I don't think they were, but I do think that people who have read it now enjoy him. And part of what I wanted him for is that there are two types of evil. There's chaotic elemental evil, and there's bureaucratic evil. There's evil that has the forms, but there's also the very strong. Like I've read a lot of epic fantasies and a lot of dystopian things, and been like, who's running the country? And in the case, it is the beleaguered minister. But you also have that archetype. You have the what used to be called the evil vizier, the Jafar character, the power behind the throne. And I was like, this has to be a very capable person, actually. And in some ways, someone who, if they're that capable, have learned the power of not being in the throne. And I'm like, well, this is convenient. But of course, when eldritch happenings happen, then this guy is so completely out of his depth. So that's an interesting journey for him. He's like, I just want to make the trains run on time. And now the gods are causing lightning storms above my castle. But in another way, also, they're like, oh man, do I have a boss who sucks? I've always had a boss who sucks. Like, how do I deal with him? And also, now in this new version, Ray has been spreading this gospel of villains unite, villains like here are some villainous archetypes and here are how they can work together. So the Emperor has actually got a relationship arc with Pio, which Pio is so sad to have, in which the Emperor is like, great, you're my evil chancellor. That'll be really useful. I'm glad I have you. And so the Emperor has grown greatly fond of his evil chancellor. And his evil chancellor is like, just don't kill me. I don't know what's happening. What do you do when your fearsome ruler bonds to you in a way because you're bureaucratic evil and he wants that? So I have Pio's terrible descent into all sorts of things, but also that he really cares about someone who otherwise I think we would also see as a villain, a sort of the a traitor lady who is very is cruel to another of our major characters. We know Pio loves her, so we know it's more complicated than that. And then Caracalla is okay. So I was thinking about great sequels, and I thought about Terminator, and in Terminator, in a lot of things, I'll say The Matrix. I would say the sequels are not great. We'll just talk movies for now. And part of that is because you need an ingenue. You need someone to be like, what is this Matrix? And then in the sequel, if he does that again, you're like, come on, keep up, come on. Whereas in Terminator 2, we have Sarah Connor becomes the grizzled warrior, where she was the ingenue in the first movie, and her son is the ingenue who is like, hey, what's happening? What's going on? And we're worried the cycle will repeat, and he will also become the grizzled warrior who has to suffer a great deal. And so Caracalla is the new ingenue who Ray is expecting because she understands tropes, but Caracalla is nowhere near her. And Caracalla also brings new light to Marius because she is his sister and she knows him better than anyone else. And he has these specific feelings about her. So he softens around her and she has a view of him that no one else has. And she's also part of my three narratively doomed women. I have a trio of doomed girlies, Ray, Leah, and Caracalla, and the deaths of all three of them have been prophesied because what is a terminal cancer diagnosis but uh, prophecy of death? And Caracalla has never survived any version of the Time of Iron series. She always dies horribly. Both both the characters who've gone into the book are aware that she meets a terrible fate, and they're mostly they're there's one character who's walked in an earlier version of the book, and then there's Ray who's walked into in her time the most recent version, and they disagree on a lot on people's fates, but they're both clear that Caracalla is going to die. And then we meet her, and she's a teenage girl. She's very innocent. She doesn't know what's happening, but she's also really straightforward, which a lot of the characters aren't. She doesn't have trust issues because she's always had Marius as this very strong. You've got Lancelot plus Superman is your big brother. You're fine. You think you're fine. But you also grown up in the Gothic manor, so you're also clear-eyed about the world, even though you're not that well acquainted with it. And so Caracalla's straightforward naivety hitting the world is something I was really excited to write. And I'm really excited to have in book 3, Kill Your Darlings.
You mentioned sequels, and I'm actually going to read from the book and quote you. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Because quite early on in All Hell Chaos, Ray is thinking about sequels, sensibly enough, because she knows we're past the point of the first book of Time of Iron. We're now into the second book, Time of Lies. Although, of course, it's always known by Ty's Time of Iron because that's what happens in long-running series. People know it by the name of the first book instead of the correct name, and as is
I do
referred to in the
love
text,
that.
of course. But Ray says in some sequels, you got the plot of the first story recycled. That's the safest option. The writer already knew readers liked that story. But then she goes on to say an exciting sequel brought fresh highs and dramatic lows, new innocents dragged into suffer, and familiar faces killed off without mercy. Well done, Sarah, because you absolutely delivered on it in a really crushing way at one point. But I like this. The self awareness was very much appreciated. For people who haven't read these, there's a lot of foreshadowing, and it's not always the kind of foreshadowing you expect, although that's in there as well. Yeah, the way Ray is thinking and the other character who's come from our world are thinking about the story, although we don't see his viewpoint directly, you can sometimes see where he's going with things because of things he says. Um, and you can see that they've got the metatextual stuff going on. And obviously, I follow you on Tumblr as well as Blue Sky and other places. And I love some of the Tumblr discussions, people really getting into the meat of the story. How much of people digging into Long Leave Evil had an influence on All Hell Chaos?
I try not to read too much. You don't want to be a looming presence. The great eye of Sauron is upon you. I have a lovely assistant called Emily, and sometimes she'll send me a thing and be like, "Hey, this is an interesting thing that I think you should signal boost, or this is a lovely thing that I think would please you to see." But I want people to be able to be on Tumblr, on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Twitter, and be like, "Sarah's Brown sucks." and feel all right about me not seeing it. If you tag me and say I suck, I think that sucks of you. But you should be allowed to say books suck. Like there are books that I love that other people think suck, and vice versa. We are all different, and that is part of the joy of media. But at the same time, I do think that Tumblr is one of the places where you still have long form text. And if you are a reader, you love reading text. I do. I've read a ton of long form Tumblr meta about A Song of Ice and Fire, about Discworld. Happy, glorious 25th of May, everybody. If you know, you know. And that kind of inspired me to think about, because text is the thing I engage with best. That's why I'm a writer. Um, to think about how fans think and different fan theories, and how different fan theories can be really valid because there are potential ways that our lives could have gone. Just there are different ways a story could have gone. And so I read more of that than I read Long Live Evil discourse, but every now and then Emily sends me something, I'm either like, oh damn, that's good. It's not where I'm going, but I love to see it. And sometimes I'm like, oh, they guessed it. And both are lovely to see, as is appreciation for different characters. Um, I'm never quite sure which character will hit. And I was wrong about some and right about others. I don't think a story comes alive in the same way for me until it hits readers. It's part of why I love writing a series, because then for a time the story is alive for them and me at the same time. The alchemy is going both ways. And now like the alchemical river is happening both ways. But anyway, I love to see it. Apparently on Goodreads, where I do not go, uh, the top review is someone saying, I talked to this author and told her book made me cry, and she laughed, and I did. I love to see it. I am so happy knowing these things exist and that they're not quite for me, but they enrich me as a river beside mine.
There is some amazing fan art out there, definitely. And I've seen some, you've reposted some of that. There's some really
Yeah,
lovely stuff.
Emily is under orders to find me all the beautiful fan art she can. I try to do fan art Fridays, but then I forget because the ADHD and chronic
Yeah, that's fair.
But I'm not at all artistic, so fan art and cosplay to me are just wonderful magic that is made real and is astonishing because I would follow around my family and friends trying to tell them these stories that I wanted to tell. And now suddenly people across the world are touched enough by the stories that I wanted to tell that they're making their own art. That is alchemy. That's changing the world. And I'm humbled by it. I really am.
I mean, it is clear to see from the books just how much fandom, thought, and stuff has gone into them. You know, you have a clear understanding of what it's like to be a fan of something and a writer of something. And I'm desperately running out of time, and I have pages more questions, but we
All
are
right, I'll
running
be quicker.
tight on time.
Go.
So I'm gonna quick fire you a couple.
Okay. Boom, boom.
Um, boom, boom, boom. So talking about fandom and fandom things, which trope do you think you'll never be able to find room for?
Ooh, I think there's always room for a good trope.
I
Trying to
spotted a
think of
few.
I put it on a lot. I had 3 fake engagements in book 2. Uh, who knows? Maybe I'll have a fourth. I had only one bed too.
Yep, yep, I
For
can
years
spot
I
that
was
one.
like, when will people start talking about AO3 tags because they crystallize forms of media and tropes so well. But then now I'm like, oh, okay, now publishing often takes a good thing and then calcifies it. I'm like, well, I'm also not writing to a recipe. Anyone who's like read the musical is like, we know, girl. Uh, but tropes in their place rather than like dictating a story are wonderful things. And I love to subvert a trope. I like to pick them up and shake them like snow globes. So I think I always will. I do find friends to lovers pretty hard because I'm always like, well, why aren't you just lovers? I don't know.
Enemies to lovers is way more interesting, I think.
I've
So
done.
another quick fire. So Alice is Ray's younger sister, and it's her favorite book. That so she's 16. When you were 16, what book or film or TV show did you want to be transported into?
I've never wanted to be transported into anything. I know that
That's
that will
cool.
end in my horrible death. If a portal opened, I would try to take my picture with my phone. That would probably fall in, knowing my luck, and then terrible dangers would ensue. I do love from the start. I love Pride and Prejudice. Howl's Moving Castle. Howl's Moving Castle is a really interesting one because it, of course, is a portal fantasy, but it's told from the point of view of one of the people from that world who later is
Mhm.
like, "What do you mean, Howell from Wales? What strange enchanter name is that?" And so that was always one I loved. Obviously, I would never want to go into Stephen R. Donaldson's Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. Only bad things happen
No,
there.
no, no, no,
But
no,
it
no.
was a big influence, of course. It's one of the major portal fantasy.
Mhm. There is, yeah. Okay, final one then. So there's a lot of inspiration. You've talked in the back of the acknowledgements. You've got a list of things that have inspired. Which of the inspirations for these books do you think is underrated or not well known enough, and everyone should go watch or read it or listen it right now?
Oh God. Okay. Oh my God, there's so many. How can I do this? Um, okay. I do think Terry Pratchett is not underrated, or rather, he's so great that I think he's underrated, but he's very highly rated. But I do
Yes.
think, and this was a big inspiration for me with the gods, because I wanted the antagonists, some of the protagonists, to be gods in this series, because I was thinking a lot about belief. Like, if we really believe in a fictional characters, if they're real, they become much more real to us psychologically if your favorite fictional character dies you more and more than if it's an acquaintance of yours who was a real person. Um, and because I was thinking about belief, it did lead me to think about gods. So Terry Pratchett's Small Gods and the way that it posited that gods live on belief, but also that people can believe in like a structure rather than the god itself. How and but how also they have a twist. He has a twist on seeing is believing. He has a lot of wonderful thoughts about religion in Small Gods, and I think it's one of the most underrated books in his genre, in his oeuvre, not in his genre. So Small Gods was a big influence on me, tied in with what I was thinking about fictional characters and also about Peter Pan. The scene where Tinkerbell is dying and they get people across the world to be like, I
Mm.
do believe in fairies. I do, I do. I mean, what else are we doing with anything we believe in? We're clapping in our hearts. We're being like, oh gosh. When we lean forward to watch the TV or we clutch the book and we're like, I hope that they get together. I hope that they live through this. we are engaging in the act of saying, I hope that which has never lived will live. And I loved seeing what he did with that. So I think if you haven't read Small Gods, it's very important to read Small Gods. Um, I do have a lot of nonfiction that I
Yeah.
could pick up, but better not.
Yeah, I think because it's one of the standalones rather than being part of the witches or the wizards or the guards, it does get missed
Yeah,
occasionally. But it was one of the first ones I read, and I would agree, it's a fantastic novel. Very, very thoughtful.
yeah, I think you're
Um,
right, but that also speaks to like loving characters, that people follow the characters they love through the little um
mm,
groups within the Discworld, and then they're like, well, this one guy only had one novel, and you're like, but it's a perfect novel.
mhm. I think it's very appropriate we finished with on Discworld for today. Like you said, it's a glorious 25th of May. If you know, you know, but it's an important day in the Discworld character calendar. Um, So yeah, everyone should go read Long Live Evil if you haven't, and go read All Hail Chaos once you have. It's fantastic. It's very good. It's like Sarah's been on tour with it for so many places. I was going to ask you about that, but we've run out of time. I mean, I know Left to
Shout out to my
Pray books
Spanish
in
readers. Some of
Dublin.
them came to the Dublin launch of All Hail Chaos. I so
Oh,
appreciate
that's
you.
incredible. Yeah, I know you absolutely sold out of Debray books for your Dublin launch, which is incredible. Well done, and
There
had a
you go.
great time at it. Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for coming along. This has been an Octocon Presents. If you are a member of Octocon for this year or one for 2025, you should have the Zoom link to come and join us in Zoom and ask Sarah some questions of your own, or if you can't think of any more. I have pages because there's a lot to unpack. And yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, and we will see you again. Good
Thank you.
night, everyone.